What's up, everybody? It's Marty back at you with another Exiled Power video. And today I'm joined by my boy Lalla. And here at Exiled Power lately, now that Legion is about 9 months deep, we've been kind of reflecting on the expansion, trying to determine has it been a good expansion and has it been a bad expansion. And whenever you're comparing something, in WoW especially, to do that, you often look back at where we came from, right? And so when we're comparing how good Legion is, and a lot of times we compare that with what came before it, which was Warlords of Draenor. Now I know that WoD is pretty universally hated, and I didn't love it either. But in my mind, Legion is an expansion that took a lot of risks, some that paid off and some that didn't, introduce a lot of new things. Now, while Draenor had a lot of problems, it also had a lot of classic WoW in it, and Legion has kind of shaken up the classic WoW model. So in this video today, we want to do a showdown between the two expansions, and we're going to look at 5 major points in the game to determine kind of who did it better, Warlords of Draenor or Legion. Okay, so the first point I want to look at in our expansion showdown is the initial leveling experience. For me, my winner for the initial leveling experience is actually Warlords of Draenor. I actually thought the leveling experience was better in Warlords of Draenor than it was in Legion. Lala, what do you think had a better leveling experience?
I think Legion had a better leveling experience for just the pure choice of where you could go and start in zones. And when the expansion launched, you could go wherever you wanted.
Hmm. So for me, the reason that I think WoD had a better leveling experience is that I thought they told a much better story. I thought that each zone had a unique and compelling story that was strong in its own standalone way, but all worked into the main storyline together. I actually kind of cared about the story progression in Warlords of Draenor, and each zone capped off with that great cutscene. Like I think that Mach Nathal between Garrosh and Thrall is one of the coolest moments in WoW history. When they blow up the Blackhand boat, those still stick with me. And for as bad as Draenor was, I was really hype about it when I was going through the expansion the first time. And I'm not a huge lore guy, but it was cool. Whereas Legion, there's some cool stuff. I like the Ferondis, narrative, but for the most part, it's go into zone, find Pillar of Creation, put Pillar of Creation in Dalaran, repeat 4 times. It felt a little repetitive. It didn't have the same kind of narrative flow that Draenor did. I also, for as shit as the garrisons turned out to be, when I was first leveling, I didn't know they were gonna be that way, and I actually liked the initial Garrison experience, how it like leveled up with you. It went from level 1 to 2 to 3 when you got to the end, and it was kind of neat in that way. Draenor also kind of gave me some flexibility, right? So in Legion, when you leveled, you basically had to do like every hub, every dungeon, every quest, and you would just scrape into 110 on like the last hub. Like you had to do it all. In Draenor, you could afford to skip like all of Spires of Iraq or all of Nagrand if you played it right. I mean, yeah, the bonus objectives were maybe a little bit lucrative, too lucrative, but they gave you that flexibility. And they also, because they were so lucrative, they gave you that really bomb-ass skip that you could make when you were leveling your alts later, where you could go from like 92 to 97 in like 15 minutes. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I thought Draenor kind of went super downhill after the leveling experience, but I thought during the leveling experience, everything made a bigger impact on me.
I just think that Legion, like you said, the storyline, you didn't miss the storyline from WoD, but when you add the choice in from Legion, that's what you miss. That's what you lose because they can't guarantee you what order you're going to go in if they give you a choice. And this is also the first time we ever saw the scaling aspect for the leveling zones. So this is exciting because I think we're going to see this more in old zones. So we'll be able to go back on play in old zones at current level. So that's exciting for that point. And also, Legion made you finish all the zones. And I know you like the option to skip. But if you think about it, when you get to the end game content where you had to do the world quest, you needed those flight paths anyways. So, like, by them forcing you to finish the zones, it was preparing you for the end game. It was also needed for the reputation for you to get world quests. So I think Legion forced you to do things for the end game results, not so it could be fast. Also, you were talking about Garrison leveling up with you. Your order hall did level up with you. You had certain quests. You were supposed to go back to your order hall every quest. Yeah, sometimes it was sent out on mission, but your order hall grew. You got more followers, different followers. you recruited big lore characters, and each one was specific. It wasn't like blanket garrison campaign. It was class campaigns.
There's a lot of good points, and they also had that whole you can level with your friends even if you're at different levels thing. I never took advantage of, but it was there. Uh, but there's a lot of good points. I will say that I thought the intro scenario into WAD was amazing. I thought that level of grandiose nature was kind of lost in Legion, but I can definitely see your point. So I guess this one's going to come to a draw in the showdown. Next up in the showdown, I want to look at raids and dungeons. So for me, and I can already feel the hate coming in, I actually liked the Warlords of Draenor raids better too. So I'm not a huge. I promise I'm not a Warlords of Draenor fanboy. Just it's two in a row. I'm sorry. But for me, the Draenor raids were perfect. Like, there were only three of them, which I admit was short and not great, but every one was so good. Like, it came out of the gate with Heimal, which I thought there were tons of good bosses in there. Margok was great, Kargath was great, the Rock guy was great. Like, even its like little throwaway raid, like the Emerald Nightmare equivalent, but it was actually like really good. Like every raid had very few bad bosses in it. They all had great atmosphere. They felt unique. They were replayable for a long, long time, and I kept wanting to go back in. I thought that the all of the budget from Draenor felt like it was in the raids. And for Legion, I love the Nighthold raids, but I really, really dislike the other two raids. Kyle, what do you think? Who's your winner, Water Legion for raids?
I like Legion better than WAD. I thought. I mean, WAD seemed. Yeah, you said it had 3 raids because that was it. There were 2 tiers, 3 raids in WAD. We've already had 3 raids in Legion, and we're finishing tier 1.
Yeah, tier one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're finishing tier 1. So, and we're going into 2 more Sargeras now, and then we already know there's a 3rd tier. They promised us that it's going to be Argus. There's going to be more raids. Yeah, sure. En was a little bit Cenarius was a good boss, but then Xavius was undertuned. But to be fair, it was their first time of going in with all of us with higher gear because of the roll-up systems being allowed. And they were experimenting. They didn't expect us to be as geared as we were. So yeah, maybe it was a little undertuned for that. And TOV, I like TOV. Odin was great. The story was good there. We followed it out of Halls of Valor. Guarm was a tightly tuned fight, and then Helya, maybe she was a little overtuned on heroic, but on mythic she was a good boss. And then you come to Nighthold, where we are now, and I feel like the difficulty curve of Nighthold was great. A lot of guilds that were at mythic, Emerald Nightmare, and TOV, I got stuck at 3 of 10 mythic. 3 bosses isn't bad, and they're probably stuck at what 7 or 8, 10 now, if they kept raiding. So yeah, I mean you're not expected to kill every single boss in a mythic guild all the time. We're still on Gul'dan, but Elasan and Gul'dan are some of the best fights I've ever done. I love Gul'dan, and Elasan was fun as well. So I think if we follow the current trend of Legion, I'm excited to be in Tomb and to do Argus, and there might be another little filler raid. They just said they loved the way TOV turned out, so we can maybe expect another one. So it's just more overall for Legion than what WAD was.
I guess the content is there in Legion, but for me, it's just boss design and atmosphere, which I think they nailed in Draenor better. However, kind of in the same vein, the dungeon system, I think that the dungeon system far and away in Legion is better. In Draenor, you had your classic do your dungeons for the first couple of weeks of the expansion and throw them away and never touch them again. This time around, we have the Mythic Plus system coming in hot. We have more dungeons in general, and they're constantly rewarding. You have a reason to do them. Even Mythic Zeros, we do rounds of Mythic Zeros still now because they're still rewarding. And to boot, I think that the boss encounters in the dungeon feel better. They actually feel a little bit mechanic, and maybe that's partly because I'm used to the Mythic Plus versions, but they actually have mechanics, unlike the WAD ones, which just are kind of rolls. So the dungeons far and away have it in Legion for me, and I kind of assume you feel the same.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Mythic Plus system. I think it's the best thing they've added to this expansion. I like doing challenging content with a few friends, and it's fun to do. The dungeons are constantly different because the affixes are changing, so it's not always the same when you go in. You have different things you have to watch out for. But it doesn't mean I didn't like the WAD dungeons. I liked them at first when you had to do them. And then one thing that I think is missing is WAD, like any challenge modes. This Mythic Plus was their try to make dungeons more accessible at a higher difficulty, which is fine. But challenge mode scaled you down, and Mythic Plus is just pretty much trying to outscale the dungeon until you can no longer do a dungeon. So it's a little bit different, and the challenge modes reward like specific transmog stuff or mounts, and I feel like it was rewarding in a different way for you doing different things that they could still have while doing Mythic Plus, but they just don't.
All right, third up in our Legion versus Warlords Draenor showdown, we're going to talk about alts. So for me, I actually have a really hard time picking a winner because I think that the alt system in both expansions is pretty shitty. So I think Legion is bad because it's just incredibly overwhelming when you hit max level. You get to max level and it's your class hall campaign and the bounce power and Surmar and all this stuff. And there's a thousand exclamation marks everywhere. You don't know where to go. You don't even know if professions are worth it. It's just so much work that you don't even know if it's worth it. And then Draenor had the opposite problem. It was really easy to get to 100, and then it was like really easy just to jump into the raid. You could just like, there was no barriers to entry, but there was nothing to do. There was nothing that was overwhelming. You would just max it out, take it to Hellfire Citadel twice, and it had the same gear as your main. Like it was instantly done. And that's nice if you just want to, play a new rotation in the raid, but it didn't offer you any like, more gameplay. So like kind of each expansion is on opposite sides of the spectrum. And I also want to address there are a lot of people out there that are going to in the comments say, you don't know what you're talking about. It's so easy to get caught up in Legion. You just pop over and grab some nether shards. You do 2 world quests and you have, like 36 points, no problem. But there are, and I'll agree that gearing up and leveling up isn't as awful as it was maybe in 7-1, but it's kind of the 80-20 rule. Yes, you can get caught up 80% of the way really, really fast, but if you want to compete on the same level as your main, that's really tough because, yeah, you can maybe get your first golden trait really easily, but getting all the way to Concordance is still a slog. And you might get 2 Legos right away, but if they're shit Legos, then you still have to grind out for the good ones. So, like, you can get mostly caught up, but it's really hard to get completely caught up. That's still a huge time gate. Kyle, where do you fall with alts?
I look at it like this: WoD, you had alts because you had nothing to do. In Legion, you don't have alts because you really don't have time for them. I think if you look at WoD, you could level up alts, but also that came with leveling the alts, you needed the garrison because that's how you got your raid quest, and it was you spent a lot of time in your garrison. So if you didn't spend time leveling your garrison, leveling your followers up, it really sucked to have your alts. And then they added the shipyard on top of that, so it's a whole nother thing you have to level up on all of your alts. But once you got it leveled up, if you did, it made you a lot of money. It was really easy to keep up on everything, but it wasn't fun. And something I think we have to keep in mind here is you're leveling an alt for it to be your alt at its core. It's an alt. It's not meant to be the same power level as your main. So I don't think Legion's doing too terribly bad. They're adding catch-up mechanics for like AP and things like that in the World Quest, and the Shard Vendor is giving you gear. The Shard Vendor can even give you tier without you raiding. But the only thing is the legendary problem is still there. If you get 2 bad legendaries, you're pretty much stuck with them, and you're missing the ones that you would want to play. But then again, it's your alt. It's not meant to be as strong as your main. So I would give this realistically over to Legion probably, because you can do more with your alt and catch up a lot quicker and actually have fun.
While I have my issues with both, I guess I would also, if I had to pick a winner, say Legion, because there's at least things to do on it. It can be overwhelming, but if I had to pick a winner, I think I'd finally agree with you that Legion takes cake on this one. All right, next up on the showdown, I want to talk about gear. And specifically kind of how you gear up in each expansion and then the legendary. So I'm not going to beat this to death too much because I know both of these things have been talked about in 1,000 videos. I will say that for me, I didn't like the legendary system in either expansion. The legendaries have their problems now. They're not guaranteed. They have wildly different power levels. And then the ring and wad was completely mandatory, but it was super grindy and annoying to get. And so both haven't been super fun. I like that the legendaries change your playstyle now. I think that's fun, but the acquisition of legendaries is kind of bad in both, and I'm going to write that off. My biggest problem with the gearing in Legion is kind of the Titan forging and War forging system, and it's not because Joe Schmo can get a 900 item level trinket out of LFR. My problem with it is that I just want to feel an equal reward for the time I put in. So if I queue for a pug as someone who's 9 of 10 mythic right now, most likely 10 of 10 mythic in this coming week, nobody knows that my item level means I'm a Mythic Raider. I could just be a normal mode Raider that got lucky, right? There's no prestige and there's no clear reward to the content that you do. And that's something I kind of miss. I don't want to say that Warlords of Draenor was better in its gearing system because it was just so flat. You would just level, you know, go to Hellfire Citadel a few times, get all your stuff, and be done. Whereas at least in Legion, you have some depth and some interest to the way you get gear. But I wish that it didn't feel like all the work I put into Mythic rating or into doing plus 18 Mythic Keystones felt like I wasn't getting the same return out of it as I was putting in. At least in WoD, I knew if I did Mythic, I would feel like I was at a Mythic power level, and I've kind of lost that. For me, I think the Legion gearing system is still superior because it has some depth to it, but I don't like feeling so undervalued for what I put in.
I feel like I obviously would choose Legion over WoD. I didn't really enjoy the Legendary quest line because it was just a lot. It was almost like verbatim for the Cloak Legendary and Mop. They were just like, let's do this again and give you something different. So it wasn't very fun. It also was not very fun on alts at all. And if you didn't have it, you were just really really far behind power wise, like a bigger chunk than just your gear. And I like the Legion gearing system. The Titan forging system could use some work. I also think that tier tokens should have the Titan Forge system before you roll them, so you can give them out based off that. And a big problem that I also have is that a lot of best in slot stuff comes from dungeons instead of raids. So I have to spend my time farming certain dungeons to get relics that I want or a neck piece that I want. For example, coming in Tomb, there are only 2 necks that drop in the entire raid. So if anyone wants a neck that doesn't have those 2 stats or the right stat on it, they're going to have to go farm dungeons. So they're going to have to do that. I don't like having to be forced to go looking for gear outside of raids. And then you also have things with the tier. They added another piece because of your legendaries can take up a tier spot. But then they add pieces into the game like Drape of Shame that's pretty much too strong for me to get rid of. So I'm wearing a really low item level piece because the affix they have on it is just too good for me to have.
You know, for
So I think,
somebody that picked Legion as the winner, you seem to have a lot of problems with the Legion gearing system.
I mean, I really like the chance, and like, don't get me wrong, when I first got my very first legendary, it was amazing. Like though it wasn't a great one, I didn't understand how strong they were going to be, I guess, to begin with, but it felt great to get my first one and even my second one. But now that I'm trying to get from my 9th to my 10th holy legendary, it just feels bad and it's not rewarding, and it's almost like, oh look, I got another legendary, just trying to grind it out before Tomb. So I think Legion is great. I like a lot of things that are going on for it, the loot system, but it could use some work.
So to finish out our list, we're going to look at our 5th and final point in the showdown, and that is end-game content in the outside world, not within an instance. And obviously the first thing comes to mind is going to be World Quests, which I think are my favorite addition to Legion. I absolutely love World Quest. They get tedious for me, but I like kind of the relaxed and finite nature of World Quest. I get to, get home from work, unwind, hit 10 World Quests, get my guaranteed AP, and it's kind of a cathartic experience. And they're different enough to where I don't feel as like inundated with them as I did with old daily. So it's kind of just like a better old daily system. I think they're a great addition. They always give me something to do. They're 40 a day. So even if they're a little boring, you're not going to run out of things to do. And I think that this point is what makes Legion the overwhelming winner for me. Even though I've picked Warlords on a few points, um, the sheer amount of things I have to do outside of raiding um, in the outdoor content is what makes Legion my overall winner. And I think World Quests have a lot to do with that. What do you think, Kyle?
I think, well, first of all, endgame content in WoD. Was there any?
No,
No, none comes to mind.
no.
Because you spent all of your time in your garrison. And so what the World Quest fixed was we're not in our order hall. Like, we have to go back to order hall to send missions sometimes. And that's where you can log out and you can also do all your artifact stuff there. But you have to go out in the world. So you have to do this to get your reputation and get your AP and stuff. It forces you to do what you weren't doing in WoD, and that was the problem. So they took what was wrong in WoD and they fixed it in the World Quest system. And it's really nice. It's rewarding. The only thing that I don't like about it is it sucks for alts, but that's a very minor detail because you don't need to do it. But the world quest let you see the world, and now with the inclusion of the invasions now, it's a lot
Mm,
like the
it's
launch
true.
event where you would just see people flying around to do these the invasions. So you saw people in the world. You weren't questing by yourself. But in WoD, you spent all of your time in your garrison alone. So it wasn't like you were playing a game with someone else. You were playing a game by yourself. But Legion, now you're playing a game with other people.
Also, until Tanan, WoD had no end level zone. It had no, Veil of Eternal Blossoms or no Suramar. And also, even outside the World Quest, we hit World Quest a lot, but there's also the Garrison campaign, and Professions, and Balance of Power. And I know that that can be one of the points I made about it being too overwhelming, but, if you get your head around it, there's never a lack of anything to do. And I think that's great. So, to no one's surprise, our overall winner is Legion. Lala thinks Legion just destroys Draenor. I think Legion is definitely better, but I didn't. I thought that some of the risks that they've taken in Legion haven't done amazing. Some of them have been amazing, but not every single one of them, is peak performance. There's still a few things I miss about, the older WoW, kind of the finite rewards. I kind of miss a few of the raid designs. I kind of miss, but I think that in general, Blizzard is going in the right direction. More content, riskier content, is always better than a lack of content, which is where we're coming from. So, thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Marty and Lala with another Exile Power video. If you liked it, go ahead and like it. If you want to subscribe and support the channel, please do so, and we'll see you next time.